thanks for joining us. Amity Gaige and Jordan Pavlin are here to talk with us about her new book, Sea Wife. So I should do a little Zoom spiel, I think, before we get started. So the best way to view the event tonight is going to be speaker view, which is going to be in the top right corner of your Zoom box. And you will be muted for the duration of the event. And anyone who just popped in and didn't hear me yet, if you don't mind turning your video off, that would be great. So I'm gonna go ahead and give a little intro, and then I'll let our two guests take it away. Jordan Pavlin is a senior vice president and editorial director at Knopf, editing literary fiction and award-winning bestsellers. Authors with whom she's currently working include Susan Minot, Julie Otsuka, Ethan Hawke, Karen Russell, Ben Marcus, Maggie Shipstead, Ayanna Mathis, Julie Oranger, Nathan Englander, Tommy Orange, Megha Majumdar, and Amity Gaige. And Amity Gaige, of course, is here with us tonight. She is the author of 3 previous novels in addition to Sea Wife, including Oh My Darling, The Folded World, and Schroeder, which was shortlisted for the Folio Prize in 2014. Published in 18 countries, Schroeder was named one of the best books of 2013 by the New York Times Book Review, the Huffington Post, get ready, this is a bit of a list, Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Kirkus Reviews, the Women's National Book Association, Cosmopolitan, Denver Post, the Buffalo News, The Millions, Amazon Bookmarks, and Publishers Weekly, among others. Gaige is the recipient of many awards for her previous novels, including Forward Book of the Year Award for 2007, and in 2006, she was named one of the 535 outstanding emerging writers by the National Book Foundation, and she lives with her family in Connecticut. So before I disappear and let these two take it away, go ahead and send any questions you have for our writer tonight in the chat box, and then I will be sending links to purchase the book, including signed copies, shortly. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Abby. I am so honored to be here with you, Amity, to read from your magnificent novel and talk about it. Before we read, do you want to just say 2 sentences about what the book is about, so everyone will be oriented to the plot a bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much, RJ, Julia. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Knopf. And thank you all for being here. I really appreciate everybody who's here. Sure, Sea Wife is, I like to think about it as a dialogue between a man and a woman who take a journey with their 2 children on a boat in Panama, and they do this in an effort to kind of reconnect with each other in their struggling marriage, and also to help Juliet, who's really the protagonist of the book, recover from her depression. That's how I would describe it: a dialogue, a duet. Somebody who was a musician was calling it very contrapuntal, if I'm saying that right. Point, counterpoint. And you can really see, in fact, I'll show our viewers here how frequently sometimes these voices do intersect and interject, grade, you can see. So it's not so much like a kind of your traditional dual narrator novel where you get like a whole bunch of pages in one and then a whole bunch of pages in the other. You basically really, it's almost as if they're speaking to one another sometimes. And this is partially why I want to have Jordan read with me. I'm so glad to be doing this event with you. I miss you. We didn't get quite to have our kind of book party or any of those things. So this is it. Jordan is going to be reading Juliet. She gets to be the girl. I'm the man, because I have a very low voice, but actually you have a low voice too, Jordan. So, but I will be the man. And so I will be reading Michael.
And we're going to read from the beginning of the novel. Where does a mistake begin? Lately, I found this simple question difficult, impossible actually. A mistake has roots in both time and space, a person's reasoning and her whereabouts. Somewhere in the intersection of those 2 dimensions is the precisely bounded, mistake. In nautical terms, its coordinates. Did my mistake begin with the boat or my marriage itself? I don't think so. It must be that my mistake took root in an innocent experience I forgot to decipher, the mystery of which has quietly ruled me. For example, I remember standing beside a blindingly blue Howard Johnson's motel pool at 12 years old, watching a couple undress one another through a half-drawn curtain, while my estranged father disputed the bill in the lobby. Should I have looked away? Did the miscalculation occur even earlier, as I sat on a rope rug in clean kindergarten sunlight, and I leaned toward the boy beside me and accepted his insistent whisper? I still feel his dew in my ear. Now I am sitting in a closet, Michael's closet. I should explain. I moved in a couple of days ago. I came in here looking for something of his and discovered that the carpet is very plush. The slatted bifold doors filter the sunlight beautifully. I feel calm in here. Hiding in closets is the habit of children, I know. I used to hide in my mother's closet when I was a kid. Her closet contained some exotic items she never wore: a silk tunic with a dragon on the back, a grassy-smelling cropped wool jacket. I loved holding these fabrics against my body, or stepping into her high heels as if onto a dais, rehearsing my future. I never felt ashamed. Surely there is some connection between seeking refuge in my mother's closet long ago and hiding in Michael's now, but that insight does not help me. Sometimes life just writes you tiny, awful poems. To be honest, I'm uncertain whether or not I can survive this day. I mean, if I want to. To go outside, requires preparation and composure. If I were to go out, to start walking around and seeing people again, and going to the grocery store and getting on with it, invariably what someone would ask me is, do you wish you'd never gone? They will expect me to say, yes, our journey was a mistake. Maybe that's what they hope I will say. But saying yes to the boat was my clearest act of loyalty toward my husband. I can't afford to regret it. If I did, I would only be left with my many disloyalties.
January 17, 10:15 a.m., log of yacht Juliet. From Porvenir towards Cayos Limones, 9 degrees, 33.5 minutes north, 78 degrees, 56.98 minutes west. Northwest winds 10 knots, seas 2 to 4 feet. Notes and remarks. We are 102 nautical miles east-northeast of Panama City, catching prevailing winds into the sovereign territory of San Blas. The shape of the coast is still visible behind us, but ahead is just water, nothing but water. That's when I realized there's only one ocean, one big mother ocean. Yes, there are bays and seas and straits, but those are just words, artificial divisions. Once you're out here, you see there's just one unbroken country of water. You'd never feel this way on land, not in our country. What a feeling. Generations of sailors have failed to describe it. So what are my chances? Me, Michael Partlow. Michael Partlow, who can't tell you the title of a single poem. Just ask my wife. Her head is full of them.
When I first met him, I thought, I'd never marry a guy like that. Too persnickety, too conventional, no sense of humor. But I was wrong. Marriage and kids and the grind made Michael morbidly funny. He got funnier and funnier, while I, who had been funny, got less funny. There was this muscle shirt to which he was superstitiously attached when we were living aboard the boat. The memory of this shirt makes me laugh out loud. While sailing in hot climates, you start wearing as little as possible. In cruising kids, they dress like mental patients. Grass skirts and flamenco dresses with muck boots and welding visors and shell necklaces, mementos of places they've been. I have no idea where Michael got the muscle shirt. Panama City? It was white, with huge armholes. Standing ashore, Beaming with his boyish face and unwashed hair, he looked like a prep school kid who'd gotten lost on a hike about 20 years ago.
The crew of our vessel is fit and in good spirits. We've been in Panama since September, but we didn't set sail until Juliet was ready and rainy season ended. That's when we started eastward on this magnificent sea. The crew of our vessel is the following: Bosun Sybil Partlow, age 7, deckhand George Doodle Partlow, almost 3, first mate Juliet Partlow, and me, the captain. The deckhand is doing his best to stand upright in the small swell. He's pantless, begging first mate to let him whiz off the side of the boat. His growing vocabulary is strictly maritime. Fish go, boat go. A very large sea turtle just surfaced port side, head like a periscope. Sybil says it's a spy. Whenever Sybil says anything cute, she tells me to write it down. That turtle's a spy. Write that down in your book, Daddy. Pardon me, I say. Are you speaking to me? What do you call me underway, bosun? She laughs. Okay, write that down in your book, Captain.
The muscle shirt was so funny because he's normally such a neatnik, a dandy, and a rearranger. He needs almost no sleep. His mother said he'd always been that way. Here at the house, he used to work late into the night, sending emails and finishing reports, but mostly man-tinkering, learning about electrical wiring by gutting another appliance or making little toys for the kids. Sometimes he'd even go across the brook where he'd built a fire pit, and we'd sleep to the rustic scent of wood smoke. In the morning, he'd leave for work as shiny as an apple. He wouldn't let the children eat in his commuting car. Goldfish, Triscuits, verboten. But the family car, my car, lawless. A layer of organic material composted under the seats. Mysterious objects thumped against the wheel wells whenever I made a sharp turn. I understand it now, sitting here. I understand how nice it must have been for him to have a little fiefdom, a closet where shoes are paired and the world is shut out and you get to make all your own choices. My closet, just there on the other side of our bedroom, is haphazard. I gave up trying to neaten it when Sybil was a toddler. After months of hanging them up, I just left all the blouses on the floor where they'd fallen after she'd pulled them off the hangers. She'd shuffle out of the closet in my shoes, unsteady as a drunk, and leave them where I'd never find them. But I am a mother. Gradually, I just gave them all away, all my spaces, one by one, down to the very last closet.
January 17, 6 p.m. Log of Yacht Juliet. Cayos Limones. 9 degrees, 32.7 minutes north, 78 degrees, 54 minutes west. Notes and remarks. Made it here no problem and are anchored off small island with a good holding. Several other yachts in the anchorage. Sybil is jumping off this transom and Juliet is wrestling Doodle out of his swimmy shirt.
Sorry, I've lost my place.
You're at Smile, they used to say, too.
What page is it? I'm so sorry.
I think it's page, it's page 6.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's spontaneous.
Smile, they used to say to sad little sad sack girls like me. Then feminism came along and said, fuck smiling. You never force a boy to smile. But as it turns out, recent studies show that the physical act of smiling does increase one's feeling of well-being. So sometimes I practice. I sit here in my closet and grimace.
And now we're on page 11.
I got it.
January 23, Cayos Limones. AM rain followed by clear skies. Notes and remarks. You know how folks out here define sailing? Sailing is repairing a boat in exotic places. First time I heard that one, I laughed. Not so funny anymore. This morning I opened up the electrical panel because a couple of the lamps were blinking and saw that half the wires were jiggled loose. Shocked we have any lights. I've got my 12-bolt Bible here and my heat shrink tubing, and while seabirds cross the cloudless sky, I'm giving myself a tutorial on crimp fitting. Doodle is sitting here next to me looking thoughtful. Shank, I say. He passes me a Lego. Tubing, I say. He passes me a crayon. But just when you're starting to hate your boat, something oppositely beautiful happens. The water beside us ripples as a pod of rays wash their wings in our lee.
I do know a lot of poems from all those hours in my corral at Boston College trying to write my dissertation before we moved out to the land of steady habits. Ironically, one reason I gave up on studying poetry is it seemed brutally impractical compared to the urgencies of 2 children. But these days, inside my closet, poetry is as real to me as an axe. I need it more than food. Lines come and go in my mind. I don't even remember who wrote them. Battles are lost in the same spirit in which they are won. I eat very little, mostly just dinner with the kids, and I lap from the bathroom tap when I'm thirsty. During the day when I have to leave the closet, I push open the bifold doors and cross our carpeted bedroom in my socks. The body creaks, the bladder longs. I avoid the bathroom mirror. When I return to our bedroom, sometimes I linger by the front windows where birds mob our blighted apple tree, not realizing they can be nakedly seen through the barren branches. I spy on them, just as the occasional curious neighbor spies on me. Our plain white house is now a point of interest. It's been on the news. I see the way people walking past our house slow down and how, if in pairs in the evening, they exchange a somber look. Vivas to those who have failed, and to those whose war vessels sank in the sea, and to those themselves who sank in the sea. It's true. History is written by the victors. That's why we need poets, to sing of the defeats.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful.
Thank
Thrilling. I could read the whole book with you.
You did so well, Jordan. That was really beautiful. You really captured it. Thank you.
Well, I love it so much. And I want to say first that I would have a longer list of questions for you if when I sat down with the book to refresh my memory, instead of rereading the book in its entirety, I had actually just noted some points of interest. But I feel like your novel has such momentum and velocity, and it's so engrossing at any point. And anyway, I read straight through to my favorite climactic sailing scene this afternoon, but I do have a couple of questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay. The first question I have to ask is about the novel's structure, which is just a miraculous feat of storytelling. I mean, it's dual points of view in 2 contrasting time frames, with the occasional late-breaking interjection of a brilliant toddler. And I would like to know when you knew that this would be the way you would tell this story.
The structure of it definitely was both the most entertaining and challenging aspect of writing this. It was really a chess match between me and myself. I enjoyed the challenge, and I think I wonder at it sometimes because, of course, the the story itself, the journey, the survival at sea is one that's been told before. But I think I wanted to find out a way of telling it that felt right for this story. And so once I landed on this idea that there would be these quickly interjecting narrators, they started to come alive in both their single identity and also in their relationship to one another. So sometimes when one of the characters said something, whether they were talking about their ideas about helicopter parenting or poetry, The other might start to speak about something almost in response to that. What the reader doesn't know at the beginning, and what I didn't know when I started the book, is that they're actually speaking in different time frames. So the book itself also has this kind of meta relationship with them, which is that they are telling a story together, but in different time frames. And once I don't know if I ever told you this, Jordan, but early on in the book, the early drafts, Juliet and Michael were both on the boat together in present tense, speaking from the boat. And I faced this moment of just feeling like the book lacked energy. I'm like, for an adventure story, this is dull. This is not the energy I want. And my husband, actually, who I'm so grateful to as being one of my first readers, said to me, why can't you put them in different time frames? Why don't you try it? And if it doesn't work, no problem. But who says what the rules are? I mean, there's that great quote about it's Somerset Maugham. There are three rules for writing a novel, but unfortunately, no one knows what they are. That's absolutely true. Why was I being bound to some idea about what a novel is? It's okay to create a new form, and I'm proud of that. I couldn't find another book to reference while I was writing Sea Wife, because I didn't have that. I would say the closest thing to it is probably this beautiful Robert Frost poem, Home Burial. And they do use different, the speakers speak in that poem. It's about a loss of an infant, and it goes back and forth between the speakers there. And both speakers are reflecting on the same event, and you have sympathy for them both, even though they completely misunderstand each other. And so I did read that a fair amount.
Well, in the novel, there's such electricity between the two voices. I mean, it is, it unfolds. It's like they throw off sparks, the collision between the two voices, and what they know and when they know it, and what the reader knows and when the reader knows it. And that's a tremendous source, I think, of suspense in the novel. Yes, but that's only because it was so brilliantly executed. I mean,
of course it could have all fallen apart. You see the stacks of cups. It felt like I was stacking a whole bunch of cups sometimes. Yes. But I will say that white space that you're just referencing is so true. There's so much space in between the speakers, and what I like about it is that asks the reader to make a moment of interpretation on their own. And I think it's a kind of a challenge. I think the reader is hopefully also borne along by the story and by the drama of the story and the setting. But there's also this opportunity to be like, oh, why does that follow that? I mean, it asks the reader for some inference and interpretation. And when I read, I really like that. I like having that sometimes there's a nugget of poetry, or there's this, and you're like, why does that follow that? How does that relate? And eventually, whether it's conscious or semi-consciously, the reader puts it together, but the reader's very active in that experience.
Yes, that's true, but it's because it's so finely made. I believe that.
Well, thank you. I accept.
Can you speak a little bit to the story that inspired the novel, the story of the Rebel Heart?
Yes, I can. And I also want to remind anyone who's logging in that Jordan and I will take questions at the end of this. This is Jordan Pavlin, my amazing editor, and we're talking about Sea Wife and our editorial process. So you can ask questions of me or of Jordan. I think I have some students even watching too. So we'll see if we get these kind of wonky student questions. But the original story was sent to me by a friend, alerted me to it because she knew I was thinking about, I think I was already researching life at sea and families who live at sea with their kids, of which there are a great number. I'm actually giving a book club reading to some of them next month, and I'm extremely intimidated because they will finally tell me whether or not I was really very accurate. But but that story that I read was about a family who was traveling across the South Pacific with their 2 young children when one of the children got spiked a fever, and also the boat started taking in water. They were rescued by the Coast Guard, and they were fine, and they returned to land. I didn't base Sea Wife on that story, but it was intriguing, and it gave me kind of the drama I was looking for when I was sort of at work with this sea book. And I was curious about why there was such an intense reaction to them when they came home. People were angry at them for taking their children. And it does kind of sound alarming, especially if you're not a sailor, to travel with children. And so I wanted to explore whether or not that was true. There's also this issue that people were upset that the taxpayer had to pay for their rescue. It was an $800,000 rescue. That is a big price tag. And so there was this kind of political element of it too, about like what people should be allowed to do and what is independence. And should we sort of cast off like that? Is that our right to be able to venture like that, or are we obligated more to stay home and not take those risks? So there was many things that were interesting to me about it. And then of course I did a lot of research to try to know some of those families and the children and see what I thought myself about the wisdom of going to stay with your children. And I actually ended up gaining a lot of respect for them, and feel that there are problems also to staying home in your suburban Connecticut town and sending your kids to the your traditional public schools. It's not that is without losses or without problems itself. So just a fascinating issue, a fascinating setting. The sea was just my original inspiration for the book, was the sea.
And I think that story, the Rebel Heart story, it does seem innately to contain so many of the novel's themes about marriage and motherhood and adventure and the longing for possibility and of quest, and also the fear of regret. I think of there's a great line in The Sports Writer where Ford says something like, I'm going to get it wrong, but he essentially says that you have to face down regret and live to tell the tale. And that, the possibility though is that it will ruin your life, the choice you make. So, I mean, this is the family's predicament, I think, exactly. And one of the questions that hovers over the novel is, was it worth it? Should they have stayed home? And first of all, I wonder whether you have, I think I know what you think about that, but I would love to hear you speak about it. And then the last question I want to ask you is about the pandemic, because I feel like there is a strange kind of, there's an uncanny similarity in a certain sense to, in the feeling of a family being adrift at sea, on a sea that is so much greater than they are, and in a moment where they have really almost no control. And I think I read in an interview with you that you said something like, yes, the family has to survive the sea, but the family also has to survive itself. And that feels to me shockingly prescient in terms of what so many of us are going through in our, isolated places with our families. So I would love you to speak to both of those, the question of regret and how you feel that this relates to the present moment.
Well, I'll start with the second question too. And it was reminding me of Elizabeth Egan's New York Times review when she brought up that quote, wherever you go, there you are. Have you heard this before? It sounded familiar to me. This idea that you can't escape yourself and your own conflicts and your own wounds. And so it's this idea that when we adventure, we can only, we take ourselves with us. Absolutely about the pandemic and about the shutdown and how it feels. I mean, I had to reread the book myself a couple weeks ago before I started talking about it. And I found it almost uncanny about how much I was relating to the book as if I hadn't read it, of being like, oh my God, that's so what it feels like right now, to be in this boat and be a little bit like kind of being a little bit mad at him and asking her to do this and trying to focus on this and carrying my feelings with me. I'm definitely the kind of person that enjoyed a certain compartmentalization to her life. This was my writing life, especially because you're a writer and it's not a group activity, so you're definitely alone. And then my mommy life, I've got 2 kids, or, my teaching life, I'm a teacher, and those neat compartmentalization. There's none of that anymore. It's one big soup, My day to day is one big, there can be a wonderful, brilliant moment, getting a great New York Times review, and the next, like, I sprain my ankle, on down the stairs or tripping to rush to get to help somebody. And my daughter needs help. So it's been very humbling and real experience for me to be in this pandemic, talking about my book, which also does have so many, it is so much about a family stuck together for better or for worse. And like the book family, my family too has also had really beautiful experiences born out of that, about the sense of how much we need each other, how we are crew on a boat. Even the kids, they really need to help. So that resonance of it is completely obvious, I think, to anyone who would read it. I think there's other resonances too that I've felt a little bit lately, which is the humbling aspect of surviving this crisis, of going through this crisis, all of us. I think that our sense of ourselves is often born out of our lives under ideal conditions. I'm a generous, just, calm person because I'm living in ideal conditions. Well, who are you when the storm hits? Who are you when you're going through, that, right? You're nodding. Yeah.
I mean, I think that the book explores that so brilliantly. What happens when the storm hits? Who are you when the storm hits?
And you are everything you feared you would be, or sometimes you're a weeping mess, and sometimes you're stronger than you possibly knew. And definitely, Juliet, going to your first question too, which was, is it a mistake or something to regret? She does grow a great deal, and we can't give too much away, but she goes through something she has to go through, and so does he. He really, it's Michael's idea, and he believes in adventure and self-reliance, and he's sick of middle age, and he doesn't want to die at the age his dad had died, and in a sort of boring, stuck life. He wants to have some. He wants to challenge himself, and and get away from some of the politics he dislikes on land. So he needs to do this, and he follows his heart. So they all do. And I think one of the things, when we think about people who take these, we all talk about it. I mean, I certainly talk about, hiking the, Appalachian Trail, or whatever, some sort of long distance thing. And I don't do it. I think in some ways I do it vicariously through my characters. So I guess that's my excuse. But the truth is, every time we turn away from something like that because we're afraid, it is a loss as well. So there's a loss to going, and there's a loss to staying. It's a little bit like, you talk about another Robert Frost poem, which everybody, The Road Less Traveled, which sometimes people misinterpret as meaning like one road is better. They're both the roads. It doesn't matter, which one you take. What are you going to make out of it? And I think there's some of that happens in the book too.
Yes.
Is that an answer?
Yes, it is. It is. And I feel in my heart, I just feel like it was not to be missed. And I feel like the book's ending is the final sort of capstone on that question of should they have gone.
And that's a teaser to all you listening, so that you can buy the book from RJ Julia.
I just have one last question for you, and then I know you possibly want to ask me a couple
I
of
do want to ask, and
okay.
yes.
But I have one last question, which is, I mean, this book, to me, this book has everything I love in a novel. It's completely consuming and transporting and entertaining and like a page turner from the very beginning, but it's also profound. It confronts, you know, very, very rich and complex themes about motherhood and marriage and how humans are meant to live and what gives life meaning. And it does that brilliantly with tremendous insight and poetry. But it is also unbelievably funny. I mean, even in the darkest scenes, I am sometimes literally laughing out loud. I mean, and it's not just wit, it has wit, it has sharp wit and you know, the brilliance of all of that. But it's genuinely funny and comic. Now, how do you do that?
I'm so glad you say that. And I always really appreciate when people say that. I just listened to the audiobook a week or so ago, and I had the same experience where I was laughing, and I was like, that's hilarious. Both Juliet and Michael, they make these sort of dark jokes at the funniest moments where it's kind of like, it's nice. It's a little leaven some of what they're struggling with, you know. I don't know. I just, you got to know the characters, right? You've got to get into the characters' minds, and then you've got to let them be funny. I suppose that's. I mean, I talk sometimes.
Funny.
I talk as if I didn't write the book. I realize that, but I feel like in some ways, sometimes I feel like I didn't. In that I was, what I did was I created the characters, and then I had a sort of confidence or something to let them be fully alive, and their humor is part of it. And Juliet even says at the beginning, I think you read this, like he was funny, I was funny before we got married, and he became more funny, I got less funny, which is in itself kind of funny.
Yes.
So I know. That line and Juliet's talking about putting her daughter to bed, and she's like, oh, she won't stop talking, it's like death by 1,000 cutes. And I guess that's more witty than funny, but I was like, oh, that's a good one.
There's some
I appreciate that. And I think that their personality and their humor is something likable about them, something that again, really humanizes them, because they can be in the middle of something really crappy and they'll still make a joke. I also wanted to reflect a little bit. I know that some people, I think people would be very interested in how things went between us and
how did
editorially. And I just, well, they went great. I took all your edits. I mean, I think I took, I don't know, 9 out of 10 or more than that of your edits. I have the manuscript here with all of your notes. Sorry, I know that's a little intimate. I apologize.
No, it's great. But I just say I have never felt so unneeded, truly ever. It was as perfect a book as could possibly be when it landed on my desk in the first draft I read. So, I mean, I am curious to hear where you think that we had any meaningful interaction, because
that's hilarious.
Not my view of it at all.
Well, first of all, the meaningful interaction we first had was when you talked to me about the book, when I was lucky to have a couple editors interested, and I talked to you and you just got it. You just got it. And as soon as I felt that there was somebody, in your position to publish and edit the book who got it, I was, that's no small thing. I mean, that's huge. When a writer writes something, there's this inability to see the work themselves that's so frustrating. It's like, if you could take a year off from your writing and read your book with this critical distance of that year, then maybe you could edit yourself, but you can't. So you need somebody else, and that person has to be with you. And so that's what I felt with you. You were with me, and not only that, you have these incredible instincts. So you have I mean, there's many cuts, and yes, they're small, but all the cuts and all the notes were to tighten the book, to keep it from, to not de-emphasize, to not emphasize the wrong thing, to keep this flow going, which is really important in the book, because it really is an adventure story. So there were some painful cuts, but I took them all because I knew you were with me, and that's such a crucial thing. I can't bring that to myself. You help me. You help me in dialogue with myself and facilitate that. So, you know, it's really wonderful. Anyway, I'm flattered you felt that way. So I am so interested in your thoughts about editing in general. I think a lot of people don't really understand what an editor does, and I can ask you about that. But since we don't have all that much time, maybe I'll ask you a question I really want to know, and it relates to what you just said. But you read a lot of books, and I think you seem that you read a lot of books, some of them that you work with and some of them you don't. You're considering them, or you're in some sort of auction for them or something. So how do you, with all that, how do you remain open to books? Like, how do you keep an open heart and open mind and not start to sort of, you know, dismissing them quickly for some small reason or liability? And how do you let books affect you, even the good ones? Like, how do you keep opening up to books?
That's such an interesting question. I mean, I sort of wish I could close up a little, to be honest with you. But first of all, I think readers in general, I mean, that's almost the definition of reading, right? Credulousness and surrender and openness to an author's vision. So I think, God, who is it that said, I think it's Emerson who said, let a man remember that we are here not only to work, but to be worked upon. And I really feel that experience as a reader of just being available to transcendent beauty or great storytelling or beautiful sentences or an unforgettable character or whatever the particular thing is that is so persuasive and convincing and irresistible about a novel. So I feel like that is an editor's kind of first qualification, is to be credulous, to want to be credulous, to want to be overtaken by something.
You're really like a test case for the book. You put yourself in the reader's, you know, that sort of universal reader's place of, say, like, can this book affect me? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of just have to believe that I have to believe, and I'm often wrong, but occasionally not, that if it has that kind of effect on me, it will have that effect on someone else. If it casts a spell on me, that there's someone else out there who will have a similar experience.
Yeah.
That's definitely what I felt with Sea Wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about Sunny Mehta? And tell the listeners who he is. I know who he is, and everyone in publishing knows who he was. Can you talk about his influence on your life?
Yeah. Sunny was for 30 plus years the publisher and editor-in-chief and chairman of Knopf, and I talked him into hiring me in 1996. When I was still fairly new to the business, and then he was a mentor and a friend to me for 25 years, and just a stunning example of a human being, you know, an extraordinary, brilliant, very cool guy. And a lot of fun to work with. And something that I always found particularly remarkable about him was his extraordinary attention to detail. Really no detail was too small. And actually, I would just say between us and everyone else who happens to be here, I mean, it is a quality I noted in our new publisher as well, Reagan Arthur. She has the same attention to detail, and I find that stunning, because I can be careless even when I try to take great care, but I think it is the mark of a great publisher never to be careless, and Sonny wasn't.
Yeah.
And and he absolutely was an outlaw in the service of books, and he loved your book, and I know you remember how involved he actually was in the jacket.
Can I tell
Please,
people?
yeah.
First of all, it's an absolutely beautiful book. It has these beautiful end papers, and the jacket itself, we saw an early version which I really liked, but apparently then Sunny saw it and like just tore it all up and said it wasn't. Changed the font, added this, which I have to admit that I didn't like at first, and I was so completely wrong. I love it. What is it? Somebody I know actually tried to, people sometimes will try to wipe it off, and it makes you wonder what occurs in this book. He was so absolutely right. I never got a chance to meet him, but I'm really honored that and I absolutely love Reagan Arthur. I cannot believe in her position that she makes herself so accessible to authors. She's so kind and funny. So I feel really lucky to be working with you guys. Let me ask, oh my gosh, we're running out of time. Let me ask you one quick question, and then maybe we can take another listener question. But you thought about a career as an academic. You got into some fancy PhD program. I can't remember where. I really know something. But you said no, and you stayed in publishing. Why?
Well, the reason to leave publishing was just very simply that I loved Shakespeare and wanted to study Shakespeare. That was the only reason to go. And I stayed because I fell in love with a short story collection, and I couldn't bear to miss being part of its publication. And I was working for an editor at the time who said, if you leave and you go into academia, you are removing yourself in some way from a world that clearly has a fierce grip on you. You should stay. And I stayed.
Yeah.
And
nice.
I have no regrets. I have no regrets. I mean, would I like to? I mean, honestly, if I could go back in my spare time, such as it is, and also do a master's and a PhD, yes, secretly I would love that. But I have to content myself with, reading poetry on my own for pleasure, and getting to work with incredible writers like you, Amity. It's just not to be missed.
Great answer. Thank you. Now we have somebody helping us. Abby, I think is her name, who might want to lob us a question or two.
Hi.
Sure. There is a question that just came in. Y'all can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Hear me? Okay. There's a question that just came in from Crystal. She's wondering what collection of short stories got you to stay, Jordan.
It was a collection of stories called The Pugilist at Rest by a writer called Tom Jones. And interestingly, his very first short story came in over the transom, meaning unagented, to the New Yorker, and was pulled out of what we call the slush pile by a brilliant young fiction editor at the New Yorker named Deb Garrison, who is now the poetry editor at Knopf. So it's sort of like it's I don't know, it feels like a lot of fate in relation to Tom Jones.
If anyone wants to ask us a question, you can ask either me or Jordan, or you can ask us about our editorial process. I know there are some writers out there who, I think this is a great opportunity to try to figure out what that relationship is like. But if not, if we don't have more questions, Abby, I can ask other ones too.
No, we have, honestly, I'm so sorry. We're probably going to have not enough time to get to everybody's, but I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in here. So one of our guests tonight, Alice, wants to know how much of your story was formed when you decided to go on your harrowing sailing research adventure, and can you talk more about your experience? Sure,
yes. I actually, thank you, Alice. I saved that till the bitter end. I was trying to avoid having to actually sail myself because I have no desire really to do that. I just wanted to write a credible book. So I waited until I had written most of the book, and then I said to my husband, you know, I can't do, there's this tang of reality I'm really missing here, and I need to go and do some more work. And he, to his credit, he said, fine. Later, he told me he was just rolling his eyes. He's just like, you think you don't know what you're getting into. And he was absolutely right, which is that though I went down in December to Grenada, which is an island nation in Caribbean. This was in 2016, and did the 10-day sailing course. I didn't realize that I would actually also run into some weather, that I would be on a boat with a couple of people, including a married couple that was under a great deal of stress, and a couple crazy figures, including a captain who was sailing the boat and was constantly smoking day and night. It was just a lot of really interesting challenges I couldn't have anticipated, but it absolutely supplied that last 20% of the book and the knowledge I needed to write the scenes convincingly. And if you've read the book, there's, especially towards the end, there's a very long scene that's really just like sailing the whole time. And that scene really needed to be right. And so I had to know what it felt like to feel heavy seas. I had to know what the wind sounds like in the rigging when it's really high. So all of those, you can't read that in a book. And my daughter just said to me, please, Mommy, please don't write a book about someone jumping off of cliffs, because I don't want you to go jump off a cliff. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Our listener, Crystal, is wondering if Jordan can speak to how you begin the editing process.
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think I begin it unintentionally the minute I start reading. If I'm engaged by something, as I'm reading, I'm already thinking about, where I would love more of a character, or where there's a little too much of something. I mean, it's to me, it's very instinctive. It's just kind of a matter of trying to see exactly what the author's vision is, and then wanting to make that vision sharper in whatever small way I can. So really what an editor is a very close reader.
And also, Jordan, there's this whole other element that happens after you read the book that's really important too. And could you just speak to that just like a little bit too, because what the other things you do in terms of getting your people in-house to know about the book? And
right. So, I mean, basically, you, the editor, you fall in love with something, and then to be effective, you have to be able to communicate that excitement. You have to be able to communicate why a particular book is so captivating and singular. And so a big part of my job is, usually when not in the midst of a pandemic, kind of running around the office, spreading the news, this is amazing, and we should be getting the best jacket, and helping to create the best publishing strategy and the best marketing campaign and publicity campaign. I mean, it's really just advocating for the book across every department, and hopefully galvanizing other readers into sharing the same sense of mission. I mean, for instance, Amity's publicist is just a brilliant, brilliant young woman named Abby Endler. And the thing that makes her so astonishing is that once a book sinks its hooks into her, she's unstoppable. She is relentless. She does not let up until she has achieved the thing that she has set out to achieve. And so, publishing a book requires so many different voices and so many different midwives, kind of. And you need, a person like Abby is such a gift to a novel like Amity's? Because it's a personal mission for her to get the word out.
Yeah. I talk to Abby like a couple times a day via email or text or whatever, you know. She's my new best friend. It's like, I'm so lucky to have her. But I didn't, you know, when I published my first book, I didn't realize what a team. I think a lot of writers, you know, just starting out don't realize what a team effort it really is. So many people, and it's also not just, I mean, the editor, publicist, so important, but also just the other people who, my copy editor and I had this like really intense, wonderful relationship where she was asking me all sorts of questions I had not thought about with the facts and the specifics and the grammar of the book. And it was wonderful to have that. So there's a lot of people involved.
It looks like Abby is here with us tonight, and she says Amity and Jordan are the best. So she wants me to pass that along.
Of course she's here. She's always there.
She's never not here.
We have someone named Terry asking if you can talk a bit about the drafting process and how the book changed over the course of your time working on it.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for the question. Yes, it did change, mostly in that shift of getting both characters, they were on the boat together and shifting to these different time frames. That was sort of the biggest change I made. But I also had to move tenses. You know, so the whole book was in present tense. Now half of it is in present tense, and the other half, or majority of it, really is in Juliet's perspective when she's reflecting in past tense on the events. That's a big change. And also, as time went on, you know, it takes several years to write a novel, and as that happens, life happens to you, and world events change. I mean, the pandemic, for example, is going to change everything going forward, including the stories we tell. But it happened to me too, that this was going over the past couple of years of political, I would say, polarization. I think we all agree there's a lot of political polarization that wound its way even into the book as well, when I realized that Juliet and Michael have opposing or different political parties and different political perspectives. And it's subtle in the book, but it's a stressor on their marriage. And so that was my way of trying to let life happen to the book, and trying to not fight against all the changes that happen to oneself and to the world in that very long interval in which you're writing a book.
Sorry, just behind the scenes stuff. We're getting some more messages and they're still coming in. Jim wants to know, did the writing of the book change how you saw yourself in relation to other people, both those you knew well and those you don't? Which, I mean, I guess you sort of spoke to that in responding to the last question, but if you have anything else.
I did, but that is it's such a great question. I mean, and it's something I guess I'm still thinking about, but I think I feel proud that I stuck with it after hitting a couple stumbling blocks. I mean, I often say to students or people who are trying to learn how to write, you know, I relate to you. I understand how hard this is. And I actually really do. And I like that I saw it through, and that I met the challenge that I had set out for myself in writing a book set at sea in multi perspectives about some pretty loaded topics. So I guess I feel good that I could, tenacious, you know, I feel about that. Also, I do believe that having to imagine the male and the female perspective of marriage, as well as some of their temperamental, philosophical differences, is an exercise that was personally useful for me. And that I think is one of the great things about literature, is the imaginative exercise of going into the other, or into another body, into another life, especially one that's different from you. And so every time I do that, if I'm reading it, or certainly if I'm creating it, is even more fundamentally impactful, changing upon me, that I do grow through that experience, that imaginative exercise that we all experience when we're reading books.
That's great. I think we have time for one more. Karen says she actually met you a couple of weeks ago at the bookstore. Must have been when
Oh,
you were
Karen. Oh,
in to
yes.
sign books.
I was just telling Jordan I got to meet a reader in a bookstore in RJ Julio just the day it opened. So I believe that's who this is.
Well, now you can put a name to or a face to the name, rather. But she wants to know if you're working on a new book and what you can tell us about it.
Well, thanks again, Karen. Can I also just say that I just so miss being able to meet Karen. Karen is someone who can, I don't know, who can reflect and with me about the book. So thanks. I I was working very well before the pandemic, and I was surprised by that because I had, Sea Wife was a bear to write, but I wanted to get back into it, and I felt like I had learned some things from writing the book, and I learned something. I was not particularly gifted at plotting books. When my first book, Oh My Darling, was called Plot Deficient in a very otherwise positive review when it first came out. But I've definitely learned how to write and to see a book more architecturally a lot better. So I wanted to do that again and raise the bar again on myself. And so I was doing a lot of research about women hikers and women explorers, mountaineers, looking for my story, and especially in the mountains of the Northeast, which are beautiful and mean a lot to me. So I think my hiking days are just starting now.
Hopefully that's a not too dangerous thing when you have to go and research it and your daughter won't worry.
Amity, that is so exciting.
Thank you. I can't wait to get back to work. I miss it. I miss it almost more than anything. Yeah.
We need you to get back to work.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jordan and Amity and everybody for being with